The purpose of this podcast is to educate our listeners, and it does not constitute professional advice or services. The legal areas, services, law and process discussed are relevant at the time of recording, and it is important that you seek independent legal advice on such topics to ensure that the law has not changed or been updated in relation to the area of law you need advice on or are interested in.
Court is in session.
Hello and welcome back to Lawyers Who Lunch. Today we have a really exciting episode for you all, and we're joined here by our local MP in Brecon, David Chadwick.
Thank you, David, for coming on today. We're really excited to talk to you.
Good morning. Thank you very much for the invitation. This is my first podcast.
Is it really?
This is my first ever podcast.
Well,
different.
it's exciting.
Yeah.
You're doing it in your hometown now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for bringing some life back to our high street.
We're trying, believe me.
One shop at a time.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got a few questions for you today, David. There are quite a few, actually, isn't there? It's trying to get to know you, get to know your role as an MP. I don't know if you've listened to our previous podcast episodes. We tried to do a bit of like what your role was as an MP, but we wanted to do a more in-depth and get to actually know what you do as an MP. So I'm going to start the question off for you and to say, so for the listeners who actually don't know about much of your work, how would you describe what MP actually does?
So I was first elected in July 2024. The role of an MP is to stand up for the interests of their constituency in Parliament, raise issues that are relevant to your constituency, that your constituents want you to raise, and then obviously to vote whenever the government passes legislation. So I'm an opposition MP, so I'm not in government, so I don't have the power to introduce legislation, but we can always react to what the government is doing and try and sort of push for the changes that we as Liberal Democrats want to see. This is the biggest constituency in England and Wales, Brecon, Radnor and Cwmtawa, 71 miles north to south. So obviously I'm representing lots of different communities within this massive constituency.
Wow, I bet that people have got a lot to say in Brecon, actually, with the Powys kind of area. I'm going to go off topic a minute, like I said I would. You said about you, like, obviously raise constituencies' issues and bring that forward. So how would a constituent, if they had an issue they needed, how do they come to you to talk about that?
So typically via email.
Okay.
I mean, that's where I receive most of the correspondence that I get. I get about 250 emails a day.
Wow.
Those aren't all from individuals, some of them are from organisations and so forth. But yeah, typically we get about 250 emails a day. But also people can get in touch via social media or by going to my office, which is just opposite Wetherspoons in Brecon, and then there's another one in Pontardawe as well, and we have an office in Llandrin, North Wales.
And then going off topic again slightly, you say about representing people's issues.
Yeah.
So do you get to, how do you pick what to take to Parliament kind of thing, or can you take your own personal issues to Parliament? Or how do you decide? Does that make sense?
Yeah, really good question. I think so. As an MP, we have a lot of freedom. MPs really have a lot of freedom in terms of what issues we decide to take forwards and what we decide to stand up and say. I think that there's this impression that MPs are sort of drip fed what they can and can't say by their parties, and I can say that as a Liberal Democrat MP, that's certainly not the case. We have a very broad range of constituencies that we represent. We have MPs from the Highlands in Scotland. We have 25 or so from the Western counties in the southwest. I'm the only one in Wales at the moment, and then we have quite a few in the southeast of England and the east of England and London as well. So we're all there to stand up for the interests of our constituents, but obviously there are broad themes that we might wish to talk about. One thing that's been very relevant here has obviously been the delay to cross-border care that people have been expecting, and the fact that they can't go to Hereford to get the treatment that they wanted, but also the closure of high street banks, which was one thing we were talking about just before the podcast started, that's been very relevant too. And that's a Westminster specific issue, so that's one I've raised a lot.
Yeah, I don't blame you actually. That is a huge chat to have. It's ridiculous. What you were saying, that to get a hub here, NatWest has to close essentially, basically.
Yeah, so there's a set of criteria for the conditions by which a town should become eligible for a banking hub. I secured a banking hub for Gunlais, and what helped me to do so there was preparing a case where I had to go and collect the evidence. They told me that lots of MPs just sort of submit requests for banking hubs, but don't actually look at the criteria, go and gather the evidence, as I'm sure you do as lawyers, and then sort of build in the personal stories of people locally who were affected by it. So in Uster I was able to build up a very strong case that area really needed a banking hub. The thing that disqualifies Brecon at the moment is the existence of a bank on the high street, because the legislation at the moment, which is governed by the Financial Services and Markets Act, basically says that, yes, if there's a bank already on the high street, then that area is not eligible.
That is actually madness, particularly when we've got venues where multiple banks
Yep.
could go in.
Yep.
I know we were having this chat beforehand, so that's actually making me angry.
Yeah, and the banks have got loads of money. The banks
Yeah.
have got billions of pounds in profits that they're making every year. Lloyds have closed down 3 bank branches, since I was elected in this constituency alone. And Charlie Nunn, who is their CEO, was awarded a CEO pay packet, or given the option to take a CEO pay packet of up to £17.5 million. Right, so the impact that is having on local businesses here
on the high street
and local people, and the fact that there are elderly people, who have now finding it really difficult to get their own money out of their own bank, and Charlie Nunn has been rewarded for implementing those closures with that kind of pay deal. It really makes me sick. Really makes me sick. They're complete bullies.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Yeah,
that is actually ridiculous.
and Parliament could change it tomorrow. I mean, that's the great power of Parliament, is that if the government wished to, they could introduce, they could change that act and require the banks to put a banking hub in every town.
It wouldn't take much to do that, because I imagine a lot of you all kind of support that issue, especially if you're rural.
Yeah.
I imagine that because you see firsthand how that probably impacts a lot of us around here.
Yeah,
that is actually blowing my brain.
I mean, we have a local economy that's heavily reliant on agriculture and heavily reliant on tourism, and both of those trades, deal in cash quite often. Cash and the need for checks, particularly with farmers, is really important, and that should be acknowledged. But instead, the big banks are making the decisions to close, and the government haven't been strong enough in standing up to them.
No, not at all. And like you said, we've done the whole how a law comes into it. Wouldn't take much to change it realistically. Like you said, I appreciate you've got the time to go between houses and all of that, but they could. Wow, that's just pulled me up now.
Yeah.
You've mentioned that you were elected then in 2024, but what first motivated you to get into politics?
I've always really wanted to do public service. So I've always wanted to serve my country. When I left school, I wanted to join the army, and I was accepted into the intelligence corps. But unfortunately, I got injured and made the great mistake of telling them about it. And they said, well, come back in 2 years. And I thought, well, I don't really want to sit around for another 2 years, just sort of waiting for something that I might not be able to do anyway, because the application process prior to that took me 18 months. And then, so I went to university instead in the Netherlands, where I was run over by a car. So my right leg was unfortunately broken. Both bones in my right leg, and at that point I thought, okay, an army career is now even more unlikely. And then I had something called Guillain-Barré syndrome, where I ended up totally paralysed for 3 months. So at that point I knew there was absolutely no way I'd be able to go back into the army, and I wanted to find another way to serve and do public service. And I thought, well, politics is actually where all the decisions are made. And so, if we want to sort of turn our country around and make a difference, then that's where you've got to be.
Wow, I mean, the takeaway from that was you've just been injured a lot.
Yeah,
wow.
I had some bad luck, but I've had good luck over the last 2 years.
Yeah, you've come out the other side, so that's okay. So you've touched on this a little bit. How is a political party made up, and what do they actually do for each constituency?
Our political system returns an MP per constituency to go and stand up for those constituency issues. That wasn't always the case. It was the case until it wasn't the case until about 100 years ago. Prior to that, constituencies often had multiple MPs, and the franchise was actually quite complicated. And also, there wasn't much by way of a political system until about the 1860s, the 1870s. And then there was an Irish MP called Charles Parnell, who basically got one of the Irish nationalist parties into a very effective political unit, and sort of made party politics the vehicle by which parliamentary politics happens. And what does that mean? So in Parliament, an MP who belongs to a political party follows the whip. And the whip is just the term for how one is supposed to vote when legislation is passed. Because one of the things I've learned over the past couple of years is that one of the challenges of being an MP is there's just so much going on in Parliament, and it can be really hard to follow what's going on all the time. Sometimes you're being asked to vote 7 or 9 times in a day, and that's why sort of being part of a party is very helpful, because the party is there to tell you what you're voting on and how you might wish to vote.
Wow, who knew that? Because we were watching one of the House of Commons videos where they were talking about this glass ball. It was a glass sphere or something, and there was balls inside it, and it like gets picked out. And what did it say? Like your issue.
Oh, is that for the private members' ballot?
Not really sure. I didn't understand it basically. So that what happens then? Like, does a load of law get put in and you get picked out?
So that's for the private members' ballot.
Okay.
So typically in Parliament, the government, basically the government have full control over the timetable, right?
Okay.
So there is a timetable, a bit like a school timetable, and the government's in charge, and they decide what is discussed and what is not, and then the opposition party have some ability to decide, and the third party have a chance as well. But every year or every parliamentary session, there is the private members' ballot, by which individual MPs have a chance to propose legislation that can go forwards, and that's chosen by ballot, which is the one that you're referring to.
That makes sense.
So the one, the private members' ballot that produced some interesting results at the beginning of this Parliament for the first parliamentary session was the End of Life Bill.
Yes, that's definitely. I'm going off topic now completely. I'm going to talk about that. What happened there? So obviously it got quite good reception off a lot of people. Like, I was all for it. I was ready to I wanted to be trained to learn how to help people do it basically. But then I think it got through the first reading and was going back and forth as they do, bouncing between, and then it's just gone to the wayside, and now it's not going to be passed as a bill. What happened? Yeah,
so this story points to lots of the flaws in our political system, particularly, the relationships between the House of Commons and the House of Lords. So one Parliament is divided into parliamentary sessions, and it's up to the government to decide how long those are going to be. And when they want to end a session, you have something called prorogation, which sort of brings to an end all of the legislation that was being brought forward in that session. So what happened with the End of Life Bill is that a Labour MP won the private members' ballot and introduced that. We then had to spend, I can't remember exactly how many sessions it was.
It's quite a while that it was being discussed.
It being debated,
absolutely.
At least 9 months. So typically in Parliament sits for Monday, Tuesdays and Wednesdays, and then Thursdays, but there aren't normally any votes on a Thursday. So nobody is there on a Friday. But Parliament is opened essentially on Fridays for the private members' bills. So that meant that lots of MPs, had to be in Parliament on the Fridays rather than their own constituencies to debate the End of Life Bill. So it was passed by the House of Commons eventually. I think that must have been at some point in 2025, probably around summer this time last year. And then it was handed over to the House of Lords, whose constitutional job is to scrutinise legislation and then hand it back to the Commons if they think it needs to be changed. And yes, the House of Lords blocked it. The maths is different in the House of Lords to the House of Commons. The House of Commons has 650 MPs. It's over 700 in the House of Lords.
Wow.
Obviously, nobody in the House of Lords has been elected. It's the biggest.
It's a hereditary role, isn't it?
Quite. It's the biggest non-democratically elected political unit in the world, political chamber in the world. And the Lords managed to block the legislation.
Wow, that's ridiculous, isn't it?
By dragging it out until the end of the parliamentary session. And because it wasn't passed in the first parliamentary session, it's now dead.
Wow, so if someone wants to bring that back again now, they're going to have to start the whole process again?
They could do. Yeah, and that's
Wow.
what would have to do, that's what would
I think that would probably get a lot of support, actually. Generally, I think it's something that needed to come in, but
well, it's a major constitutional issue that, you know,
Huge.
the elected House, the House of Commons, tried to pass some legislation and was blocked from doing so by the unelected House.
yeah, which is actually balmy.
It's crazy. And one of my takeaways from going to the House of Commons so far is that all of the terrible things that are said about the House of Lords are true. Like, all of the criticisms
Really?
about the House of Lords are true. You know, you barely, as a member of the House of Commons, you barely know who's in the House of Lords.
Yeah.
You very seldom actually see each other.
Which is actually madness when you're all working together, like, and how we, like, as we know, like, it goes to them, it goes to you. You'd think there'd be like a more, you know, I don't know what the word, united front of like getting this forward.
So then what's the point in having a House of Commons then and you have your elected people?
Yeah.
What's the
Yeah,
point of
that's
having the
what
House of
people-
Lords? We should just
Well,
abolish
yeah,
the House
yeah,
of
like-
Lords. Like, it wastes
There
so
is
much
discussion
time.
about that, isn't
It
there?
wastes so
I
much
definitely
time.
read an article recently that someone had brought out that they are genuinely talking about that the House of Lords should go.
Be abolished.
Yeah.
Yeah, like,
should
they don't have a second chamber in the Senate in
Yeah.
America. You know, they trust their senators to pass legislation.
But we voted for you to go and do that as well, haven't we, realistically? Like, we vote for you to go and represent our wishes and feelings, so why shouldn't we? Yeah.
Why should the House of Lords be allowed to block it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Quite. And
absolutely.
it really slows down government, because you know, if you're passing stuff from the House of Commons and you have to pass it to the House of Lords, who can object to it, and they have to debate it. Firstly, it just really slows things down,
Yeah.
because they can get in the way, and things sometimes disappear in the House of Lords and don't come back for 3 months. So it stops effective, like, rule making. And then there's this democratic problem of, you know, the House of Commons obviously at the moment has a Labour majority, massive Labour majority, but the House of Lords doesn't.
Yeah.
So, you know, they can't actually get things through the House of Lords if the House of Lords decides to block them.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's crazy. Which kind of actually probably leads us on to this next question of some people would say that the UK Constitution is actually really outdated. This kind of topic is suggesting it is. What do you think about that?
It's terribly outdated. I mean, that's
Yeah.
one reason why I'm a Liberal Democrat, is because we believe there has to be really deep, whole-scale political reform for bringing our country into the 21st century.
Yeah.
We have, you know, this horrible phrase, I think, that we have the oldest parliament, you know, the mother of parliaments, something the Conservatives always say. And you think, in no world is it best to have the oldest system. You know, like, if you're installing cybersecurity software for your computer, like, you don't go and download the oldest one.
No.
You go and get the newest model that's sort of up to date and that's sort of learned from all the other systems that are out there.
I mean, like, historically it's great, isn't it, to say, like you said, like, we've got the oldest, we're using it. Like, the King just used it, didn't he, with Donald Trump's speech, to be like, we started the Magna Carta, you're based off all of us. But actually, if you're not getting anywhere, because it's a bit like the This Is a Family Law one, they have said that the presumption of children seeing their family is about to change. The government have approved it to say, at present, the law says that the child has the right to see their family, but they're changing that presumption to that a child doesn't necessarily have that right, to try and protect children. But then the government announced with it, but we need to, like, sort this out, basically. And how long's a piece of string? How long's that going to take?
Yep.
Is it going to be blocked again, like, further along the line of, we've announced it, it's all fantastic, but actually could it just fall down the wayside? Which doesn't work then, does it, realistically?
It's an obligation of political duty if the House of Commons passes stuff to the House of Lords and basically says, can you sort this out for us?
Yeah.
You know, like, Parliament is not doing its job properly if we're not proposing good enough legislation. And obviously it's the government's responsibility to do so. But, you know, having a bunch of unelected, generally very elderly people who are often sitting in hearings until like 3 o'clock in the morning checking legislation for us does not symbolise, in my opinion, a modern political system.
No, because I can't imagine there being very many young Lord members going through at the moment, because they're waiting to get that title. You're waiting for them to die, essentially, aren't you? To, like, pass that on that role.
It can look like a care home.
Yeah.
It can look like a care
Wow.
home. Yeah.
Well, that's mad. But that kind of, you again, going on to this next question, actually, this is flowing quite well, is how important is Parliament's role in actually holding the government accountable?
Very important, very important. I think one of my proudest achievements so far was being part of the opposition to the introduction of the family farm tax. You know, the farming unions in particular helped run a really good campaign against that. But I remember sitting in the chamber when the Chancellor came forward in the autumn budget in 2024, which was like the first opportunity the government really had to show what they were going to do with this parliament after being elected, because they didn't have very much by content on what they were going to do, and then that was the first sort of real show of intent of what they intended to do for the parliament. And I can remember the Chancellor saying that they were going to make changes to agricultural property relief, and I could hear Tim Farron, who is one of my fellow Liberal Democrat colleagues, and he's our agricultural spokesperson. I could hear this like cry of anguish from Tim Farron, sort of saying, "No, you're going to kill the farmers." And he was sitting next to Alistair Carmichael, who is the chair of the DEFRA committee. And basically, within that sort of 10-minute session when they were listening, they decided, this is going to be a really bad thing, and we've got to push back against it. So as soon as the media interviews started happening after that debate, we sort of got onto the front foot and started making the case for how damaging this was going to be for communities like this one.
I was going to say, you live in like the perfect area for that to be like a no.
Yep. And so by keeping the pressure up, over the year and 2 months I think it took for the government to change their mind, we managed to get a change. And how do you do that? So obviously you've got sort of the stuff that's happening outside of Parliament, demonstrations,
people really rallied behind
massive
that,
demonstrations. I mean, the farming community did a great job, but inside Parliament, we were triggering votes all the time, which meant that the Labour MPs who represented rural areas started to pressure their own government, saying this is being really unpopular, and you're making me vote for something that's being very unpopular in my constituency. So please, can we change? And that's how enough pressure was applied to get the change.
But that kind of shows your the importance of your role as well, being you listened to the people, you and the other MPs have actually listened. It's kind of quite reassuring actually, is that you are listening to your constituents in the area and taking that issue to Parliament.
Look at the tractors.
Because people would probably argue that you don't they, realistically, if you were sat going, because we have no idea what goes on in your day-to-day life. They're probably going, oh God, he didn't, Whereas actually, you have just proven that you rallied and supported a huge change. And like you said, you defended it, so...
And thank goodness the government decided to change its mind.
No, I actually really agree.
Which was really, really welcome, because I think that the greatest problem that created is that there are so many other conversations that need to happen in agricultural communities, and they were essentially blocked out by that. That quite rightly drowned out all other.
We come from farming backgrounds, don't we? Not so much us living in the farming life, but my dad was a chicken farmer. He ran the chicken farm per se, and my partner they had a little small holding. But people don't actually realise that. People think farmers are rich and really wealthy, don't they? But actually, it's the assets that they're sat on. The actual farm itself doesn't tend to make all that much money. Business, because as Jeremy Clarkson has kind of proven, hasn't he, in his little him and Caleb's argument to see who made the most profit. They make a pittance.
Quite.
And then we're going, let's tax you on all of this, shall we? It just doesn't work.
It was so unethical and unfair that the government decided to try and raise revenue from low profit earning farms compared to banks. Which, as we've
just said, 17
billions of pounds.
Billion
they're making billions of pounds in profits.
Wow.
Those are the people that we should be taxing. Not farmers, because if you tax the farmers, as you will know better than anybody, basically what's going to happen is that the ownership of farms will move from small and medium-sized businesses here to overseas investors who just decide that they want to own a farm and not do anything with it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's quite sad actually, isn't it, when you look at it like that?
Well, that's
it's the reality of what would have happened, but it's really sad when you're talking about it.
So that kind of goes into my next question then. Do you think that the public's trust in the government and Parliament has kind of been damaged recently? Do you think it's going to be rebuilt?
So statistics generally show that faith in politics and trust in politics is falling. But if asked, people tend to have more faith in their local representative, which is quite interesting because it shows that there is some hope. And that by having a really good and engaged member of Parliament, that does reassure people that there's a point to democratic politics. But generally speaking, trust in politics is falling. And obviously the really interesting question is, why is that? And I'd say that's because we've had sort of 40 years of failure. Everything's just been getting worse for the last 40 years. and we haven't had a government really come in with a proper plan to change that. And I think that's why this government has lost so much support from its very early days. The first thing they decided to do was the winter fuel payment.
Yeah.
I mean, try and be quite well connected in my constituency and go and door knock people. And I know just how many poor pensioners we have in this constituency. And it was no surprise to me that they were going to be very upset by losing that amount of money, because it's what gets them through the winter. But the government came forward without a plan and decided to make some really unpopular decisions like that first and foremost. So I think the best thing we can actually do to restore some faith in politics is to have a plan and communicate it and make sure everybody knows what the plan is going to be.
Yeah.
Just listen. I do think you're right though. Like I don't have any faith in the government at all whatsoever, but I do think I really home in on our local MP, yourself. We've talked and had discussions. I've got real good faith in you, but even members of the Senate that we know, you trust your local person more than you actually trust the government on the whole. So I can kind of resonate with that. Actually,
why don't you trust the government?
I don't know. Genuinely, I don't. Is the
I think
answer.
it all.
But I think it's because more so, like you said, and you talking about it, we don't seem. None of them ever follow through with what they say.
Yeah.
And it could be this government more so at the moment, potentially, that they just make terrible decisions are being made. I think the only good decision, and I'm not going to talk about it, is that's going what we said before, is the Attorney General has taken that poor little girl who was raped, the 15-year-old with the two boys, has taken it back to the Court of Appeal to get that sentence. That's given me a bit of faith at the moment, because I think they're starting to wake up maybe to real issues that are going on with the world. But I just think it's probably going back to that we're stuck in a really archaic world, and we're not moving forward in Britain. We don't seem to be going. Once upon a time, we were we were the Empire of Great Britain, weren't we? We were fantastic. We brag about it. We used to you saying again that people used to be, oh, look at this fantastic system we built on. I don't think we've kind of forgotten about Britain itself, and we need to make Britain great again.
Yeah, we've got to focus on ourselves for a bit.
And bring that back up. And it's great. It's fantastic that we support all these other issues and other countries. Don't get me wrong, because I think if we needed support back, it should be there. But I think we need to try and make us as a country better and great again. And I just don't think we do that very well at the moment.
Quite. 100% agree. Have you ever believed in a government?
I mean, I feel like I'm too young to really.
I was going to say, for my generation, as being quite young, when we first started getting introduced into politics, when we first started voting, everything was around COVID time, when obviously everything happened with the parties and all of that. So immediately we were shown they're laughable almost. Why should we trust them, because they've gone against. That was our first experience of the government.
That was so embarrassing, wasn't it? My dad passed away 4 years ago. We weren't allowed to go see my dad in hospital, but good old, all the political parties were sat having barbecues and parties in their own home, but I couldn't go see my dying dad, essentially, in Parliament. So it has broken that faith, I think, for people. And we were all stuck to you weren't allowed to go and travel, you weren't allowed to do this, you weren't allowed to, and they were having the time of their lives.
Yeah. So coming back then into sort of your role in this constituency, what are some of the biggest concerns that people in this constituency bring to you the most?
Healthcare and the state of the economy. Those are by far the biggest issues at the moment. I mean, climate change is obviously also very topical and very relevant here. We had the warmest summer ever. Last year we had the longest drought for decades, and I think that brought home some home truths to a lot of people. But generally, it's health and the economy. In terms of health, we've got thousands of people who are stuck in hospitals and can't be discharged because there are no beds for them, because social care just doesn't exist. And then we have lots of people who are waiting for operations that they're not being sent for because the health board here essentially doesn't have enough money to pay for the treatment that they need. And in terms of sort of trust in politicians, I think the Welsh Senedd election that we just had did a lot of damage. It's done a lot of damage. The new system that's been introduced, but also the style of political campaigning and the lack of credibility from what the opposition parties have been saying. Because if you look at the the issue with people who can't go to Hereford for the treatment that they need. One of the issues for that is that we have a health board here in Powys who have a budget deficit of £50 million, right? £50 million is their annual budget deficit. And so they've decided that they can't afford to keep sending everybody to Hereford because they can't afford to meet the costs of them being treated. And then we had Reform politicians during that Senedd campaign who were saying, we're going to fix the NHS and we're going to solve this issue by cutting income tax by a penny on the pound. And that would cost £370 million, right? So they would give away £370 million and make the healthcare system in Wales even less capable of coping with the pressures that are on it.
Which is ridiculous.
And very few people have them to account. Like our local MS, James Evans, he was out saying that all the time. We're going to fix the Welsh NHS and there's all this money being wasted. And you think, well, your top policy would take £370 million away from healthcare. And that £370 million, if you added that, which was our policy to put 1 penny on income tax, that would be enough to plug every budget deficit across the 7 health boards in Wales.
Wow.
So we were honest. We were honest. Doesn't mean that people liked it, but we were honest with telling people what actually had to happen to fix the problem.
Wow, yeah. So then, what sort of one change you would like to do before the next big election? Would it be changing the healthcare, or would it be something else?
Definitely love to lift the weight on for those people because I've met many of those people who are waiting for operations. They're often more elderly and they're now just sort of stuck inside their homes. Some of them are, they're of all ages, but lots of them are just stuck inside their homes. They've just retired and they're not able to live the retirement that they want because we don't have a healthcare system that's capable of providing it for them. And I find that so unnecessary because I had the good fortune to live in another couple of different countries like Belgium and the Netherlands where they have great healthcare systems. And you don't have people like that. You don't have people who are just sort of sitting around incapable of getting the healthcare treatment that they need. I find it really immoral.
Where do you start though with fixing the NHS? Because having my brother works, he's a nurse in Liverpool, he says what is happening for him that he really doesn't like is they've got big wigs at the top making decisions but actually have no idea what it's like to work in the NHS because they are well paid, really wealthy people but actually have no idea what it's like to work inside the NHS. So how as a government, where do you start? Does that make sense? Because I don't agree with privatising the NHS. I don't think that's going to fix the issue at all. I know, don't get me wrong, I know people can privately pay for things and things get done quicker, which is also utterly ridiculous. But where do you begin? Where does that change begin?
Well, that point about privatisation is a really important one because people say, we shouldn't let the NHS be privatised. But essentially, there's loads of private supply already happening, which is tragic that, for lots of these people, the only way that they can get the hip operation they need is to pay £8,000 or £20,000 to go and get it done. So that already exists. And what that means is that we have a 2-tier healthcare system whereby we have the people who can afford to pay that and then the people who don't. And in terms of the sort of the question about managerial structures, I mean, that's something I've heard a lot, particularly when I'm campaigning here and talking to people who have worked in the NHS locally. That's one issue that comes up a lot. So that's something that we're developing a lot of policy on at the moment. And hopefully by the next general election we'll have a really strong manifesto on those changes. But there are long-standing health issues here, sort of in the border counties, that mean, for example, if you go to a GP on this side of the border and then you go to Hereford, they probably can't access your digital records. I mean, that's ludicrous. And the only way you change that is by having a better data system, which costs money.
I was struggling, the NHS is struggling, we all know that, don't we? It was just awful and just horrendous.
It's not beyond us to fix it. Other countries have with similar GDPs, similar kind of people across Europe, they managed to get it to work, so we have to look at what they're doing and learn from it. Because
I think my biggest concern, because obviously America have private healthcare, don't they? My biggest concern, you hear all these horror stories, what you said, like we've got people that can afford private healthcare and all of that, is the people that then go over to the wayside. Like you hear these horrible stories in America where they're like, I'd rather stay at home than go and like have to, because they've got to pay for the ambulance, they pay for this, and I'm like, can you imagine like actually just not being able to walk through the hospital door because you were too frightened of how much you were going to own? I just don't think that's a world we should be living in.
No.
At all. And I also don't understand why like dentists aren't part of the NHS. I know that you've got NHS dentists, but why did we suddenly decide that teeth were not part of the...
Same for GPs. Like GPs are also private businesses.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, absolutely. And the opticians, suddenly we have to pay to go see an optician. Again, I know they're all important things and stuff, but why did we decide those body parts were separated? Yeah. Is it my questions now? Sorry. Right, this actually does very nicely into the Senate election, doesn't it? You touched upon James Evans. We know he's there's quite a few. How many? You told us earlier there were
6.
6.
There are now 6 for Brycheiniog Tywyn
There we
Nave.
go.
Yeah.
Okay, so what stood out to you most from the recent Senate election results?
Oh, just the complete lack, the complete lack of scrutiny of what's really going wrong in Wales and what you actually have to do to fix it.
Okay.
And the fact that, as I said, that we had the Conservatives and the Reform parties both saying we're going to fix the NHS, we're going to declare a healthcare emergency and all this, but we're also going to take a penny off income tax, which would strip the NHS of the funds it actually needs to fix these problems. And that party came second, Reform, and now the opposition in Wales.
Yeah. Which is mad. So this then kind of again leads on quite nicely in this flow of, do you think the voters in Wales are actually sending a different political message from voters elsewhere in the UK? Because
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, my mum's side of the family are from the valleys. They're from Maesteg. Okay. And when I was growing up, everybody that I was related to, which is most people in Maesteg, voted Labour. Voted Labour. You couldn't sort of separate the place and the political party. And then personally, I saw between 1997, and I remember one of my earliest memories is watching like people celebrating the Labour Party's win in 1997 and just seeing how happy they all were.
Yeah.
And then sort of following that to 2010 and seeing that nothing really changed for them. Like the Labour Party didn't lavish them with gifts and jobs and change. And so I saw that drift over time, and that's clearly the message that Wales has just sent as well, is that Wales wants change.
Yeah, and that, so coming obviously, like, you're from Wales, this is what, your mum?
So my mum's family are from Maesteg. I grew up in Gloucester.
Okay,
yeah,
I was going to say, the Welsh accent isn't...
No, but neither does, my mum doesn't have a Welsh accent either. But no, I grew up in Gloucester, and my dad was born in Sheffield.
Oh wow!
So
okay.
A weird hybrid of steel producing areas.
Yeah, I love that. But you're back now living in Wales.
Yeah.
So do you think Wales have more powers than they used to? Do we think we've gone far enough with devolution? Have we not gone far enough, or do we need more devolved powers? Where do you sit with that?
Okay, so there is a graphic somewhere that will show you the powers that Wales has relative to Northern Ireland and Scotland.
Yeah.
And Westminster obviously has the most. But Wales has far fewer powers than Scotland.
Yeah.
And for me, that's just completely illogical and offensive to our status as a nation, because we've had to fight really hard to be recognised as a nation, and therefore we should have equal powers to Scotland.
Yeah.
So the Crown Estate is one sort of very relevant topic at the moment. The Crown Estate has been devolved in Scotland, but it's not been in Wales.
No. Not at all. And it's because what we do, everything we do is like the law of England and Wales. I appreciate Wales has like devolved powers, and like things are slightly different. Like for us, with more the contact centre stuff, isn't it? The safeguarding is in Wales, it's illegal now to physically punish your child in any way, means or forms. But in England, you're still allowed to have the reasonable chastisement of a child. So we've got, because we work so closely to the border, it differs. And it's really hard to have, how do you go, well, Wales has got this, but England has this. Should it be separate? Should we be all under one umbrella? How does that make, how are we, Scotland, we couldn't do any Scottish work because the laws are completely different. Like we'd have to get, if we had a Scottish client, we'd have to get them to go and like actually see a Scottish person if it impacted them, because I know nothing about Scottish law. So it's quite interesting. But I actually agree that I do think that Wales, like if we're going to devolve out governments, it should all be done fairly.
And we now have the Parliament for it.
Yeah.
They had the expansion of the Senate. There are now 96 Senate members. So, we do also now have a Parliament that should be capable of administering these new laws and Powys.
Absolutely.
And why it matters, I mean, the devolution of the Crown Estate, firstly, there is the principle, that we should be seen as equal to Scotland. But also, you need to have ministers in Wales who are looking at what the Crown Estate is doing here and sort of fighting from the Welsh perspective of trying to get more jobs and more investment in Wales. We shouldn't have someone in Westminster doing that job for us because it just won't happen.
Yeah, no. And I suppose it's great for you because you get to go and actually do that for us realistically because you are taking that to London.
Yeah.
So, which again leads me on really quite nicely onto our next question of how closely do Westminster politicians actually pay attention to the Welsh politics?
Well, for me, it's what I'm rooted in.
For you,
my daily life. I mean, the rules and regulations that apply here apply to me, and they apply to my two sons. And you sort of see the differences at school and nursery, right? Particularly in terms of bilingualism. So I pay very close attention. Do I think the government have paid much attention to what's happened in Wales? No. And one of the reasons why they've been so heavily punished is because they have done very little for Wales in their first 2 years. There are 32 MPs in Wales. There were 40 until 2024, and then the Conservatives cut 8 because they don't care about Wales. So there are now just 32. 27 of the 32 are Labour. There are quite a few of them are in the cabinet, so they're at the top of government in real positions of power. And what's Wales had over the last 2 years? Nothing. Very, 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 very little. And I think people in Wales have noticed that.
Okay, which is crazy, isn't it, when you've got members actually there in the topic of it all that could represent Welsh issues realistically.
They've just taken Wales for granted. They just think that Wales would continue voting Labour forever.
Yeah.
But the strong message was that it won't.
Yeah, we're starting to wake up to that, aren't we? Because that again leads on quite nicely to, did the Senate election reveal any wider trends that you think could affect UK politics?
Clearly the rise of reform is one of those things that we're seeing across the UK politics.
Yeah, that quite boomed, didn't it?
Yeah. I was trying to think the other day of when reform became one of the major talking points in this parliament.
Yeah.
Because at the beginning in July 2024 they only had 4 members elected or something, and I had to do my behaviour training with some of the Reform MPs, which was an interesting experience. So I think that was one thing that it really revealed, but also obviously the amount of support for Plaid Cymru also reflects that people want to see a Wales with stronger powers.
Yeah, and we touched upon James, didn't we? James Evans has just changed. He was Conservative before, has now gone to Reform. Are you able to change your party? Because he had a lot of backlash for doing that.
Yeah.
How bad would that impact a politician? Or if you now suddenly went, no, I don't agree with all of this anymore after supporting it for 2 years, how much could that actually damage?
I mean, there have been lots of politicians who have jumped ship to try and save their own skin.
Yeah.
Back whenever it was that we heard a rumour that might be happening, I did ask him about it.
Yeah.
And he responded by saying that he was a Conservative and always would be.
Okay.
And posted a very funny social media video about it. I don't know if you've seen that one.
I probably have.
And then decided to jump to Reform.
Wow.
I suppose every political representative would have the opportunity to do so.
Yeah.
Personally, I chose the Liberal Democrats in 2015 when we had 8 MPs.
Yeah.
So it's not like I decided to pick the biggest party to just become an MP.
Yeah.
I really believed in what the Liberal Democrats were standing for. I really admired the party for fighting Brexit. With just 8 MPs, and we were the only party saying this is wrong. It's not going to work out well.
Decision, yeah.
Exactly. And I thought, okay, I'll have some of that. I respect these people. And then if I go and read speeches by David Lloyd George, who still remains the only Welsh Prime Minister we've ever had, I think so much of the principles that he stood for remain relevant to understanding and acting in our modern world.
Wow.
Yeah. I love Welsh liberalism.
Love it. But I think that is right there, and it's kind of been the topic of the conversation. Is are you okay?
Yeah.
It's not funny when it's your funny bone, is it? Is that we do need to move with the times, don't we? We need to keep up. Realistically, so it's quite refreshing to hear someone that actually does want to keep up and move us. And
we can't live in the past.
No,
I can't
we
just
learn from it.
I can't just go out and read out David Lloyd George's speeches in Parliament. We've got to look at what's changing in the world, but you have to have your firm anchor that gives you the first impressions on how you respond to stuff.
So, talking about something that's been in the news a lot recently and been very prominent there, what is prorogation?
Okay. Prorogation is the formal process by which a parliamentary session is ended. So think of a parliamentary session a bit like a school year. The government decides when they're going to be. And so when the government wishes to bring a parliamentary session to an end, that's what prorogation is. And what does that mean? Well, it means that any legislation that the government was trying to pass in that session comes to an end. So that's what happened to the assisted dying bill. It didn't make it through that session and therefore fell. There's a couple of things they can do to bring over legislation from the one session to another. They have to have a carryover vote, which allows them to carry stuff over or not. But yeah, prorogation is the term for bringing a parliamentary session to an end.
So I'm gonna, before you carry on your question, what is the difference between that then and like when you go for recess? Because you do get breaks throughout the year, don't you?
Yeah.
So what's the difference between the two?
I mean, parliamentary recess is basically just a break.
Okay.
Like, it's just like a school holiday.
Yeah.
And basically Parliament does follow the school holidays really
Yeah.
closely, which is great because I've got 2 kids.
Yeah.
But yes, whereas the parliamentary session has implications for the legislation that a government is bringing through.
And who makes that decision? Is that your...
Well, it's the executive, so the Prime Minister.
Okay.
And that's the real debate about prorogation, is whether or not it's right for the Prime Minister to have that executive authority.
Yeah.
To just be able to single-handedly say, no, we're done now. We've had enough of this, it's over, we're moving to the next
You
session.
could literally just pick and choose, couldn't you then? Be like, I'm not enjoying this bill coming through, we're done.
Yep.
Break in.
Well, he can do that with Parliament. I mean, they can prorogate, but can also dissolve Parliament. If the Prime Minister decided that he wanted to go to the King and say, I've had enough, can we have another election?
I think people would probably welcome that quite a
lot. He has the right to do so. And the question is whether or not Parliament should have the power to vote on prorogation instead. Because that would hand power back from just the Prime Minister to Parliament.
And then obviously in the video that kind of went viral about it, we saw the black rod knocking on the door.
Yeah.
What's the deal with that? Like, what's the significance of that?
Black rod is a sort of parliamentary role that's been around since about 1350, and in terms of the knocking on the door, that's to symbolise the independence and the autonomy of the Commons from the King. It dates back to the English Civil War, when the King, Charles, tried to arrest 5 MPs.
So it's a tradition then, rather than going back to this archaic parliament.
They shut the door in his face.
They did, literally, they slammed it in his face. I was like, see ya, get out, bye.
It's to emphasise the independence of the Commons, which I think is a really important part of our parliamentary democracy, is that the House of Commons does have power.
Yeah.
That's where power really lies. It's not with the monarch, it's with Parliament.
Yeah.
That's what people fought for centuries to get.
Well, absolutely, it's a huge part, and I think it's quite relevant now, isn't it, that people of power aren't above the law.
Yes.
I won't mention who I was thinking of. I'm sure we're thinking the same person, but absolutely. Have you got any more questions about it?
Yeah, I was going to say this is. So, should Parliament be suspended at all, given its role in lawmaking, and the decisions they make, as it could frustrate their sort of duty within it? So if they stop Parliament, no laws are being made, are they?
Yeah. I mean, we currently have a really ineffective government, and one sign of that is the fact that they weren't able to get their own legislation through within a parliamentary session that they themselves define. It just defies logic. It really defies logic that they haven't been good enough to get their own legislation through. No. And I remember the first couple of weeks of the Parliament, actually, I remember going for a vote and standing next to Ed Davey. And I said to Ed, what's this like compared to 1997 when you were first elected? And he said, well, they just don't seem to be moving very fast. Because when I arrived in Parliament in July 2024, our party was sort of prepared for the government to have a big plan and to be rushing through legislation like every day. Yeah. So we thought we might be there from Monday to Thursday, voting. And then it was just like tumbleweed. Just very little happened for the first few months. Yeah. Because they didn't have a plan.
I guess we need the plan. The moral of the story is we need a plan. Have you got any more? No, that's fine. So this is more about your personal life. So what's the hardest part of political life that people don't see, and what's one misconception people have about MPs?
Definitely the impact on your family. and your personal life, because you do have to sacrifice that. So, I have 2 children. One of them was being born since I was elected. So I remember having to decide when Gemma was due whether or not I should go to Parliament at all, knowing that it's 4 hours to get back, and whether or not I might miss anything important. So that was quite challenging. And it just eats into your daily life. There is no sort of off time. So about this time last year, we went away to Spain during one of the recesses. And again, one of the things that we were told at the beginning of the Parliament was just go away during the recess if you like and have a break. And everybody will call for Parliament to be recalled, but it will never happen. So we went to Spain. We decided to go there for 7 days. And I thought this would be great. Could take some of the childcare load off Gemma and step up. And then we were driving along the motorway in Alicante, and Gemma's phone buzzed, and it turned out that Parliament was being recalled for the nationalisation of the steel bill. And obviously, as the MP for 9 wards in Neath, Port Talbot, I had to be there.
Absolutely.
And that was quite challenging because, as I said, we were just on the side of a motorway in Spain.
So did you literally just do a U-turn, get back on the plane, or had you driven? What did you do?
Yeah, I mean, so a couple of relevant things. If you want to speak in a debate in the House of Commons, you have to be there at the start of the debate.
Okay.
Which meant that I had to be there by 9:30 the next morning.
Okay.
Right, and I didn't have any clothes. I did have clothes, but I didn't have a suit. I didn't have a suit. So and you're thinking 9:30. Where am I going to buy a suit from before 9:30? That means I have to buy one here and I have to take it with me. So we drove to the nearest shopping centre that we could, motorway shopping centres in Spain, and I went and sort of looked in the suit section. I think it was a Zara, and it was a really Spanish Zara, and the only men's suit that they had that I could find had scorpions on it.
I love that.
It was like a black suit with scorpions, so red and yellow scorpions, and I just thought, oh God, no, I'm gonna have to wear that. I'm gonna have to wear that into the House of Commons. Oh gosh. And then fortunately, we realised that there was another shopping centre that we could go and explore.
Oh thank God.
And I managed to get a very boring grey.
I would have loved to have seen that actually on your social media, you turning up in the House of Commons.
And now I regret it. And that's the best ever social media piece I got as well. I've got 200,000 views on my speech.
Really?
Because I stood up and said, what about Wales?
Wow.
Why are we doing this for England and not Wales? And just imagine how much further it would have gone if the Scorpions had been
Imagine that would have been... Oh, can you imagine if you were in your shorts and your T-shirt and your flip-flops?
You're not allowed in.
Oh,
no! As a dress code? Well, for men, it's very restrictive.
Okay.
Yeah, you're basically just dark suits.
So they would have turned you away at the door and gone no.
Yeah, they wouldn't have let me in if you turn up in shorts. You're not going in.
Oh wow! So it was really important that you actually got a suit. And then my last question is it's kind of linked to social media, and you saying about the 200,000 views of how much pressure do MPs feel from social media and online debate?
Well, I'm very, very grateful that I'm not a woman, because I think women are subjected to much more horrendous abuse and interactions on social media. I've been very fortunate that I haven't received anywhere near that level of intimidation on social media. I find social media helpful in terms of it enables me to see what people really care about quite quickly, and obviously it helps you to get some immediate feedback from your constituents.
Amazing. Well, we know you have to go and look after your constituents, so thank you very much for coming and having this chat with us today, and you're more than welcome to come back because I've really enjoyed this conversation. But yeah, thank you again.
Thank you for the invitation.
Your first podcast.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I quite like the political update idea. We might have to make that a feature.
Take it off the bucket list.
Saving the high street.
Absolutely. One step at a time. Yeah.
Thank you for listening to Lawyers Who Lunch. Don't forget to follow us on social media on Facebook, Instagram and TikTok. If you have any topics you would like us to discuss or any other questions, don't forget to email in at lawyerswholunch@outlook.com.